The Clerk's Tale. After the bawdiness of the Miller's Tale and the Reeve's Tale, we arrive at the Clerk, who is a clerk of Oxford, and he's sitting very quietly on his horse. And the story that he tells goes something like this. There once lived in Italy a marquis who was much loved by his people, for he governed the land very well and was very kind to the people under his care. He was a young man, quite handsome, but he had yet to marry. And there came a time when the people approached the marquis and said, "It is time for you to marry, Lord. You need to marry, produce an heir, so that we know that there will be peace and order for our children and our grandchildren." The marquis had no desire to marry, and yet there was one maid who had caught his eye and perhaps had found a little place in his heart. And she was the daughter of a poor man, but he saw her in the village. She tended sheep. She spinned the fleece into wool, spinned the fleece into yarn. She worked very hard. And of course she was beautiful, because people in stories are always beautiful. So the marquis set a date for his wedding. And he arranged a feast. And he had a beautiful dress made. And the only question which remained unanswered was, who was his bride? So, a few days before the wedding, the marquis rode to the village where our fair maiden lived. It's Griselda. And it was then that he said to Griselda, "I would like you to be my wife." And Griselda, standing there in her poor woman's smock, was, of course, well, you would be, wouldn't you? A little bit taken aback by this. But the ladies that the marquis had brought with him helped her out of her old ragged smock. And so it was that she was taken to the marquis' castle. I assume he lived in a castle. Has to be a castle because it's the story. And there, a few days later, she was married. And when, a year or so later, a daughter was born to them, it seemed that their happiness was complete. And yet, the marquis was aware that there were whispers that he had married beneath himself. And he decided one day to test his wife, perhaps to test her fidelity. That's a long word, but I'm sure you all know what it means. The marquis had a sergeant, an ugly man. That's your cue. All right, you ready? You're supposed to hiss and boo at that bit. Okay. The sergeant, an ugly man. Okay, quick boo there as he walks on stage, so to speak. Went to Griselda's chamber late at night and said, "I have been commanded by my lord to take your daughter." And to Griselda's horror, the sergeant took her beautiful daughter from her arms. And Griselda wept, thinking she would never see her daughter again. The Marquis, her husband, said, "I have doubts." Griselda wept inconsolably. But, of course, the sergeant hadn't really killed the baby girl. She had been taken to Boulogne, and there she was raised in secret. The secret, so don't tell anyone until we get to the end of the story. Okay, can you keep a secret? Right, well done. Time passed, and Griselda bore another child, a beautiful son, a lovely baby boy. And when her son was a year old, the ugly sergeant, you can hiss and boo if you like, the ugly sergeant came once more to Griselda's chamber and took her infant son from her. And although Griselda believed that her son had been killed, he too had been taken to Boulogne, and there he was raised in secret. Shortly after this, the Marquis went to Rome, and it was there that he found a forger, a clever man who could write false letters, false documents. And he wrote what looked like a document from the Pope himself. And it said that the marriage was annulled and that the Marquis was free to marry once more. Time passed, as time does, so it was 12 years from the time that the Marquis and Griselda's daughter had been born, when the Marquis announced to Griselda that their marriage was no more and that she should return to her father. That he had a new wife, he had a new bride. And Griselda accepted her fate. And when a 12-year-old girl, accompanied by her younger brother, yeah, I know you've worked out who they are, but Griselda hadn't yet, okay, so just bear with me. All right, it's a story. I know you know, but she doesn't. All right, and she's a character in the story. Okay, bear with me. Yeah, right. So, Griselda found herself waiting table for the welcoming meal for the beautiful, very young woman who was to be the Marquis' new bride, accompanied by a handsome boy child. But of course it was then that their eyes met, and Griselda realised that the 12-year-old girl was, of course, her own daughter. And so it was that mother, daughter and son were all reunited. And Griselda took off the dirty old smock that she'd been forced to wear, and dressed again in the beautiful gown of a marchioness. And her father, who was now old and frail, came to live with them. And so, having tested his wife and found that she was indeed loyal and dutiful, and being reunited with his children, they all lived. Are you ready? Come on. This isn't a Chaucer line, but I think we can do this one. Are you ready? They all lived, come on, happily ever after. But of course, this is a Canterbury tale. And of course, a lot of what makes the Canterbury Tales really work is the kind of dialogue between the pilgrims. So, of course, the clerk turns to the wife of Bath and makes a point of saying that, of course, all wives should be virtuous and loyal to their husbands. What Chaucer doesn't tell us is quite what it was that the wife of Bath said to the clerk. But if you read the wife of Bath's prologue, you'll find that she would have had a great deal to say about the idea of wives being chaste. So, I hope you like that one. It kind of works out all right in the end, doesn't it? Although there is one part where Griselda says that she thought her children had been eaten by wild dogs. So I'm really glad they weren't. You? I think you're glad they weren't, really. And you're glad that they all lived happily. I'm sure you are. But I'd still love to know what it was that the wife of Bath said to the clerk. So, there's other Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, lots of Brothers Grimm stories, and I think that one does sound a little bit more like the kind of thing that the Brothers Grimm told, actually. Lots of other things, so do subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.